I started 22 books in March. That is not a normal reading month for me, but I'm currently off work, so I have a lot of time on my hands despite all my other projects. I started off by reading Vicious by V. Schwab, and I DNF'd it. I have mixed feelings about V. Schwab. I appreciate that she is a good writer. I like her prose. I like her, like, the poetic nature of her writing. I can tell that she's studied it and that she's good at what she does. I've really enjoyed books like The Near Witch, and I enjoyed the first book in the Darker Shade of Magic series. Didn't love that series, didn't finish it. The first book was good. Near Witch was good. Vicious. Superheroes and evil villains just aren't my thing, and I appreciated the twist she was trying to put on that trope, and I thought it was kind of interesting in the beginning, but I just wasn't here for it. I tried that one on audiobook as well, so maybe it was the audiobook. I just wasn't interested enough to finish the book. My next one was No Gods for Drowning. I only got like 20 pages into this book. I could not tell you what it was about. I DNF'd it. Look up the synopsis for yourself. Sorry. Oh my god. I read Our Share of Night. This fucking book. I've been trying to read more horror lately, so I read a lot of fantasy. I've recently come to the conclusion that YA fantasy is not my thing anymore, so I'm trying to spread out into adult books and other genres and things that I might like, horror being one of them. I've read some really good horror books. Our Share of Night is translated, I think it's an Argentinian author. Hang on, this is why I've got a Corpal spreadsheet, so I can write this shit down. Spanish is all I've got. I think it's Spanish. So she's a Spanish lady, but the book is set in Argentina, I want to say in like the 80s and 90s, but don't quote me on that. And it is such a long book. It is 736 pages. And I finished this book out of spite. It felt like it was fucked up for the sake of being fucked up. And I understand that's kind of what horror is sometimes. But when you're talking about sex cults and chronic illness and just general child abuse, I just kind of wanted to smack a bunch of the characters. And I just got very angry with them. And if that's what she was trying to achieve, then well done. You did it. It fucked me off. I might try other things that she has written, but not if they're that long, because it wasn't worth it. And I don't mind reading tomes, but that wasn't worth it. No. I would recommend it for people who have very few things that trigger them. Please check the trigger warnings before reading this. Then I read La Forteresse de Pierre. I've never had to say that out loud. Which was a comic book I picked up in a charity shop. And it was okay. It wasn't amazing. It was like you're sort of raised by wolves trope in a sort of a medieval setting. The art was quite cool, but it was a charity shop thing, and I'm gonna keep it because I quite like collecting French comics. Didn't blow me away. The art was cool. Then I read Horseradish by Lemony Snicket. This is another charity shop find. I loved Series of Unfortunate Events when I was a kid. I am now aware, since after finishing this book, that Lemony Snicket is not such a nice person. Horseradish is just a book the size of one of the Unfortunate Events books, but each page is like a little poem or a quote that is just incredibly negative and snickety, if that makes sense. If you know Lemony Snicket, you can kind of gather what I'm on about. It was a quick read. I read it in one sitting. If you really like Lemony Snicket, read it. If not, you're not missing anything. It was mildly entertaining. It took me about half an hour. Then I read Harpy's Flight by Megan Lindholm, who also writes as Robin Hobb, who wrote the Assassin's Apprentice series. So Harpy's Flight is about this woman whose family is killed by harpies, and she comes from a group of sort of nomadic people, or she married into a group of... She's either from a group of nomads or she married into the nomads, whatever. But it's about her doing a job and the man she meets along the road, not in a romantic way, if that's interesting to you. But it also flashes back to when she had to return to her late husband's family and explore the differences in culture between how she was grown up, how she grew up, and how his family expect her to act in the wake of the death. Because the fact that it was a harpy attack that killed her husband and daughter is a bit of a sticky situation, because her late husband's family worship harpies. It's interesting. It's a short enough read. I'm going to read the next one at some point. Yeah, it's pretty good. Then I DNF'd The Institute by Stephen King. I've never read any Stephen King. Not sure if The Institute was the best one to start with. I got it from the library. It was really boring. It was just really boring, and it circled around a lot of men, and I don't have the time for that. Thanks. Soz. But then I read Once and Future Witches. 5 stars. Fucking loved it. It is the most, like, powerful book I have read in a long time about these 3 witches and how they get involved in the suffrage movement in... I don't know if it's a made-up town. It's called New Salem. Yeah, it's a made-up town, I think, in America. And how they fight back because witches are known about, but they're sort of treated in the same way that women are treated. And it sort of looks at how those, the rights of women and the rights of witches sort of run side by side. And there's, like, rebellion. And the 3 sisters are so distinguished and set apart. It's fantastic. There's disability rep, there's LGBTQ plus rep. It made me cry, and not in like a sad moment, though don't get me wrong, there are sad bits. But in a, oh my god, that was just so emotionally powerful, my feelings have to come out of my eyeballs. 5 stars, I highly recommend. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. I love T. Kingfisher, so I'm sort of gradually working my way through all her backlog. I have DNF'd quite a few because her young adult stuff isn't my favourite. This is definitely young adult, but it was very enjoyable because I really enjoyed the fact that the main character's superpower is that she's good with bread and dough and like baking. She can make gingerbread dance. It's a whole thing. She has a carnivorous sourdough familiar and a jealous gingerbread man that lives on her shoulder. It's a rollicking good time, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. If you like that sort of thing, read it. It's very good. Then I read another T. Kingfisher. I read The Twisted Ones, which could not be more different to A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. The Twisted Ones, the first half, very creepy. It's a horror book. It's about... I'll tell you what it's about first, shall I? So it's about a woman whose really nasty hoarder grandmother has died, and her father has asked her to go and clean out the house, essentially. And it's about the things that she finds there and the twisted ones. And I'm not going to say any more than that, but there's a lot of body horror in it. There's a lot of really creepy shit in it. First half of the book, loved it. Really creepy, exactly what I want from a horror. Second half, didn't go where I really wanted it to go. And I lost interest a bit, so that sort of dumbed it down to a 3-star. I'm glad I read it, but I'm not sure I enjoyed it as much as, say, What Moves the Dead by her, which is also one of her horrors. It's a retelling of The House of Usher. I enjoyed that one a lot more than I enjoyed The Twisted Ones. Then we have a reread. I have started being good. I got rid of Audible and I downloaded Scribd again. So I was scouring Scribd for audiobooks that I might like. And I loved Sorcery of Thorns when I read it physically. And they had the audiobook, and the audiobook was pretty good. So I reread that just to have something to listen to, and it was 5 stars again. It was good. I love that. I love that book so much. And then I bought, straight afterwards, I bought the novella that she's just published. Which is sitting on my TBR shelf, and I think I'll get to that this month. But yeah, 5 stars, read Sorcery of Thorns. Oh, plot. Should probably tell you some of the plot. Book magic, libraries, grimoires that come to life, evil people who want power, demons. That's the plot. Yes. And then I figured I'd carry on my spiel of like rereading old favourites. So I reread the Clockwork Angel trilogy by Cassandra Clare. It was great. Loved it. I've said to myself that I'm going to stop reading young adult, but I have also told myself that I'm going to reread everything Cassandra Clare has written. And I have since bought everything that Cassandra Clare has written as a result, and it is sitting in a very imposing stack on my TBR shelf. I will read all of it, just maybe not this year. I loved The Mortal Instruments. I'm not rereading The Mortal Instruments because I've read them too much, and that's, I don't have the brain power for that. But I've not read past the Clockwork Angel series, and I know she's published like 15 other books, so I'm starting from the beginning after The Mortal Instruments. So I've read all of the Clockwork Infernal Devices books, and I can't remember what's next, but I've got a list, so I'm going to read those next. Then I read Wolf Song. So with TJ Klune, I enjoyed House in the Cerulean Sea, though I now understand that there are issues with it. I didn't know that at the time. I tried Under the Whispering Door and didn't like it. And I got 200 pages into this 500-page book thinking it was really interesting. Like, I really found it interesting the way he was narrating this book until the romance kicked in. And if you've read it, you will probably... It's the age gap. The age gap of the romance really fucked me up. So brief spoilers, in case you're going to read it, but the main character hooks up with someone that he's known since they were 10 and he was 15, and it just feels really icky the way that they did it, and it was weird because it felt like grooming, especially when you bring in it's werewolves as well, so when you bring in the whole, like, there's almost an imprinting thing, there's a similar thing, and that got involved, and I didn't like it because it was used as an excuse for what is a very uncomfortable age gap in the book. Didn't like it, DNF'd. I DNF'd A Far Wilder Magic. I felt like I had read it before. It was something, I didn't get very far into it. It's about a girl who spots this animal, this white fox, I think it is, that comes on, that's part of a magical hunt that happens every now and again, and a bunch of people like come together and try and hunt this fox. And her mother is a famous alchemist, and this boy who has nothing comes and tries to convince her mother to be her apprentice. And I don't know what happened after that because I DNF'd it. I then immediately tried to read The Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rossner, and DNF'd that as well. It's about two sisters in a wood, and I believe it deals with Jewish mythology, but it wasn't my cup of tea, so I DNF'd it. Then I tried The Sky and the Deep by Adrienne Young, got halfway through that, realised it was setting up for the typical YA love V, and DNF'd it. I kind of felt like I'd read it before, you know? It didn't feel new or interesting, so I DNF'd that. But then I borrowed The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers from my library on a whim. I'm not normally a sci-fi girl. I find sci-fi to be very cold, whereas fantasy to me is very warm, so I don't really read sci-fi. But I have heard many, many good things about this book, and my library had it, so I was being good and not buying books. So I borrowed it, and I fucking loved it. It's a very good book. It's very funny. It's very heartwarming. Characters come first and plot comes second, which is fine because all the characters are really interesting. There are so many different species of alien. The cultures were just so well thought out, and the way that their physical beings and the way they interacted with people and the way that they lived was also well thought out and like combined. It was very, very good, and I enjoyed it very, very much. And this book is very popular for a reason. The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, kind of like The Twisted Ones. I really enjoyed the concept of it. It was set in like an independent museum full of taxidermy, and then they find this weird hole in the wall that kind of leads somewhere else, and then it's all very creepy. It did suffer a bit from why the fuck would you do that? You are going to die syndrome. But then I guess you kind of have to have that in some horror or it's not fun. Just like the Twisted Ones, the beginning was very good. The ending kind of fell off a little bit for me, but it was very, very creepy. So if you're into that shit, read it. Then I DNF'd The Way of All Flesh by Ambrose Parry. There's not much to say about this. It just wasn't very interesting. I picked it up at a charity shop and no, wasn't good. Then I DNF'd Red Rising as well. That wasn't good either. I thought I'd be able to hop on the sci-fi train, but apparently that wasn't the book to do it with. So if you have recommendations for good sci-fi, please tell me. And then lastly, I read Tender as the Flesh by Agostina Bazterrica, and it was very, very good because I was horrified from start to finish. It was just so gross and so horrific, and it just, oh, there were so many hateable characters, and I'm normally someone that has to root for characters, but I didn't really need to root for any of these characters. No, that's not true. I was rooting for the main character from the beginning till like 3/4 of the way through the book, and then if you've read it you'll understand why I no longer rooted for them. It was disgusting, it was well thought out, and honestly I kind of believe that would happen at some point. So there we go. I read far too many books in March. My camera battery is dying, so I'm going to finish this here. Please let me know if you have any recommendations for sci-fi, because that is something I'm dipping my toe into. And I really don't think I'll be able to read that many books again in April. That was the video. Enjoy. That was, oh my god, that was so many books. I have a problem. Yeah. Happy April.